My name is Beverly, and I go by Bev Slavsky Rich.
And I'm Cynthia Francis Gensheimer, and I'm interviewing Bev this morning in her home. Are we in Centennial? Or what's your...
It's Englewood, actually.
Englewood. Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
No problem.
And today is March 2nd, 2024. Bev, I'd like to begin just by having you tell me the names of your father and mother, including your mother's maiden name.
My father is Israel Edelman, and my mother is Eileen Weiner Edelman.
And where were they born?
My mother was born here in Denver, and my father was born in Boston, Massachusetts.
How did they meet?
When he was stationed at Laurie, a long time ago.
And what brought your mother's family to Denver originally?
Well, they're all natives. So I'm a native, and my mother's a native of Denver. Her parents, too.
Her parents were born in Denver, too? So your grandparents were born in Denver?
Yes.
And can you give us a rough idea of when they were born then? Was it around 1900 or before 1900?
You mean my parents?
Your grandparents?
My grandparents, oh yeah, they would have to be. Let's see, my parents were born in 1922, so they would have
around
to be...
1900 or so.
Yeah, or 19... I don't know, would you say 1910? Somewhere between 1900 and 1910.
Well, I doubt it was 1910.
Oh, okay.
Just in terms of the arithmetic.
I'm not sure here. I don't know exactly.
And where your grandparents came here independently of one another then? And their parents, were they from Germany or Russia, or... Do you have any sense of that? If you don't, it's okay.
I think it was all Russia.
Uh-huh.
At that, yeah, my grandparents' parents.
Right, okay. And
same with my dad's side.
Same with your dad's side. Mm-hmm.
So his mother and father would be about the same age as my mother's mother and father. So I don't know just exactly. It's funny.
But your father, did he grow up in a Yiddish-speaking household?
Yes, he
And
did.
what about your mother?
Not as much. Yeah, but my dad, definitely. My grandmother on his side really very rarely spoke English. So.
And what kind, in terms of religious observance, the level of religious observance, were your parents, did they come from similar backgrounds then?
They did, more conservative.
And is that the way you were raised?
Yes.
Did you belong to a congregation?
I did. Our family belonged to Beth Joseph Synagogue. And I went to Hebrew school there. I was bar mitzvahed from Beth Joseph.
You had a bat mitzvah?
I did.
Were you one of the first, or was this commonplace at that time?
I don't know exactly, but they didn't do us individually. Our whole class did it together, and we all had our little part that we spoke, and we sang songs, and it was very, very, very lovely.
Was that girls only then, or was it...
Yes, it was. We were 12, and that's when we were bas mitzvahed. Yeah.
So that's what they called it, and it was not called a confirmation, right?
Right.
Oh, it's very interesting.
The confirmation came later.
And were you confirmed also?
I was.
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah.
So was the bas mitzvah held on a Saturday morning or a Friday night?
It was, I think, a Friday night.
And did you have to learn to read Hebrew as part of that?
Yes, we did.
So how many days a week did you go to religious school?
3 days a week.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's very impressive. And then after the bas mitzvah, did you continue with 3 days a week, or did you go...
That was more like 2 days a week.
And were there any clubs, Jewish clubs that you were a member of in high school?
Yes. 4-H club for one, and I was in a sorority, and mostly though BBG. And I was in BBG 587, and it was a big part of my life. And I held many positions in my club, my group, and went to conventions, national conventions, regional conventions, and that was my whole social life. That was my life.
So that's B'nai B'rith girls,
Yes.
and there were numerous BBG chapters here in Denver?
Correct.
And yours was just one of them?
That's right. There were several, both on the west side and the east side. I grew up on the east side, and I would say there had to be at least 10 BBG groups and AZA groups too.
So did you have dances?
Yes, many. And I was invited to all of the sweetheart dances that the AZA people had, and I became a sweetheart of AZA 705. And it was great. And if I had a time to go back, that would be the time. I had a great relationship with people here in my community. I went to Carson School Elementary, Hill Junior High, and then Washington High School.
Well, tell me how you were selected to be a sweetheart.
Well, let's see. They had several girls that they
Nominated?
They nominated. And then we had to give speeches, and we had to tell why we would be the right sweetheart for their group. And of course the guys were great, loved them all, and I was selected. I won, and it was a very exciting time. They had a dance downtown. We were at one of the hotels, and I couldn't tell you today what it was because they've all changed, and I don't know. But I remember the band that played, and I sang that night in that band, and it was just wonderful. And that's the night I was crowned.
Was there a fundraising component to all of this? Did you have to raise money for the boys?
No.
No?
No. It was all really basically social. And one of the things I had to do was date each and every one. And in other words, we would go out for coffee, for ice cream, for a hamburger, it was not serious dating. It wasn't like each one for a long time. It was just a date. But each one got to take me out, and I just thought it was great.
So were there in your BBG chapter and then in the boys chapter that you were the sweetheart of, were the members grouped according to what congregation they belonged to or what school they went to? Or was it a mixture?
It was mixed. It was, who knew? They went to East High, South High. I was in Washington. They went to different synagogues.
Was there a social service component to it where you did community service of any sort?
Yes. To tell you the truth, they had community service. We did scrapbooks. We raised money for our individual little BBG chapter. We had different projects that we worked on throughout the year. We had religious times together, especially the conventions and regional. We always, were around campfires and sang songs and Hebrew songs, regular songs, and it was just great. It was basically social.
And was there a summer camp associated with it?
And not necessarily. They did have the JCC camp, but that's separate from the BBG.
So did
They
you
had
ever?
meetings once a week and on a Tuesday night, and we met at the JCC where it is now. And each chapter and the boys, we were all congregating in the hall. Then we would go into our meeting from like say 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock. Then afterwards, you know, the boys would ask us out. We went to the Holiday Inn on Colorado Boulevard. That was the big thing. It was just so fun.
So
Yeah.
it was maybe 100 students altogether involved at that time, or 200?
I would just say there's 25 to 30 kids in each one of those BBGs and AZAs. So I'm not sure. I would say more like 200 or
Wow,
maybe more.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
So after, you said you went to George Washington for high school, and did you experience any anti-Semitism when you were growing up?
No. In fact, the best part about me is that wherever I lived, I thought everybody was Jewish. Didn't even question who they were, why they were, or anything. I just assumed. So I'll just tell you a cute story. I lived at 150 Glencoe growing up, and that's in Hilltop. And the Denver Country Club was just a little bit further west from Hilltop. And I did not know it. They didn't accept Jews there at the time, but I didn't know it, and just thought that whole area was also Jewish. And I didn't question, and I wasn't told, and there was no discussion of that in my family. We just did what we did, and so I didn't think about anti-Semitism like we are now.
Right, and did you go on to school after high school?
I did.
Where did you go?
I went to CU.
And what did you study?
Speech therapy.
And did you work as a speech therapist?
No, not really. After I did that, I got married, had children, and I became also a decorator, and I still do decorating. And I also was a travel agent, and before all that, though, I was a BBG advisor. After I was married and had children, I was an advisor for 8 years. And that was very challenging, and I loved it, and the little girls were so adorable. And I wasn't all that much older than them either. But one of the things they told me is that I can't wait to be your age so I can wear blue eyeshadow. I'm still wearing blue shadow.
Oh, that's terrific.
And they were just so cute. And I feel I really was an asset to these girls. I was very open and fun-loving, and they felt comfortable and talked to me about many things. And some of these children had problems at home. Some were on drugs. Some were runaways. And I dealt with some of that, and I got several of these girls to go back home to their parents. And I was instrumental in having them talk with their parents and their children, and to tell the truth of why they felt how they did and why they ran away or why they did drugs. And that was not at the meetings. This was like after time.
So your position was a paid position?
No, I believe it was volunteer.
And
It was not paid.
were you assigned to one particular BBG chapter?
I was. It was 1211 that I was the advisor of. And it was a fairly new chapter at the time. They still kept some of the old ones, the names, the numbers. And but 1211 was new, 1210 was new. and I'm not sure about all the others. And I can't remember the ones on the west side so much because I was involved on the east side.
And how did you get involved with the NCJW then?
Oh, well, I was first very involved with Hadassah, and a lot of the women, when I started out with Hadassah, it was the Englewood, Littleton group, and it was out south here. And then I was membership and fundraising for them, and some of the ladies found out about me. And one day I was at the Egg and I was eating, and another lady came over to me and said, "Gee, would you be interested in joining NCJW?" And I said, "Oh, what is that? You know, National Jewish Women. Oh, what do you do?" That kind of thing. And they were wanting me to be membership at the time. And I was familiar with how to do that and how to get members and recruit women. And I told them, sure, I would do it. And that's how I became involved in NCJW.
At that time, when did you, approximately when did you get involved with Hadassah? Was this the 1970s, the 1980s?
Definitely the 1970s. Yes. I was married in 65, so I became a member of Hadassah right away. Had many meetings at my home here. And we did a lot of community service projects. Certainly raised money for the hospital.
The Hadassah Hospital in
yes,
Israel?
In Israel. And it was just great. And then fundraising is when I did more, where we had dances, and we also just had meetings where we showed movies and told them about Israel and what they were trying to develop in Israel and why we were fundraising and why it was important to have these events. And we would do it at different hotels, have bands, dancing, dinner, the whole enchilada. And it was just really, really fun.
About how many members were there in the Denver area in Hadassah at that time, would you guess?
My goodness. Well, see, I was in the young group at first. And then Denver Hadassah was the older group. So my mother and all of her sisters and relatives were in the Denver chapter. And then when I met up with another friend who wanted me to join Denver Hadassah, and I did fundraising and membership with that. And then I had to switch. The president of that organization, of Denver Hadassah at the time, told me I had to switch from the other group to Denver. I couldn't belong to both. So I said, okay, it didn't matter to me. As long as I was doing the same projects and raising money, and I was very into Israel. I've been to Israel. It's a wonderful, wonderful place. And I'm so sad now what's happening. It's just a heartbreak. And I'm hoping that people still give to Israel. And I certainly still give money. And I hope that this will work through to a better place.
And do you think that at the time that you were a member of Hadassah, was there general support for Israel in the Denver Jewish community? Or was the community divided between people from old German Jewish families that had not really been Zionist, or was that difference, you didn't feel that difference?
I did not feel that difference at all. We all belonged to these organizations because we believed in what it stood for. and we all worked for that cause.
So the membership of Hadassah was overlapped with the membership of NCJW
Oh, yes.
in a big
yes,
way?
You definitely belonged to both. I mean, there you didn't have to belong to one or the other.
In some cities it was stratified and they were separate groups, at least in the earlier years. So NCJW's membership, did you increase the membership when you were in charge of the membership committee?
Oh, yes, we did.
And how did you go about doing that?
Well, we had to decide what programs we were going to do for the year, and we had to decide what would appeal to younger people as well as the older folks, because we wanted to engage everybody and keep them a part of it. And I think that that is very crucial. And I'd like to talk about that a little bit, if you don't mind. In NCJW, in the last, I'd say, 6 years, I feel that they did not want the older folks as much. They wanted to get the younger, which is important. We need young people and need them to get engaged. But it's very specific in NCJW. That is more of a political organization, and not all people are into the politics. And so they stuck with Hadassah more because they were wanting to give money to further the hospital and the Israelis and to make their life better. But NCJW really always was political, and I think are much more political now than ever before. And I feel that they're they were progressive when I was president, and I feel they're very left now, to the point where it's scary.
So who was the president of NCJW when you were the membership chair?
Let's see.
Do you remember that? Or give me a rough idea of what year you became involved with, in the 80s or still in the 70s?
Let me just think here. Well, one of the people that I know that was president was my aunt, Marlene Weiner. She was married to my mother's brother. So I was involved in the younger chapter at that time when she was president. And, there were quite a few after her, too. And
so let me interrupt.
I had another aunt, but she was not president, but she, too, was involved in membership. And her name was Dorothy Paris. And that was my mother's sister. And
so there was a Jewish section, a junior section of NCJW and a senior section?
No.
Oh, you're talking about
I'm
Hadassah
talking
now.
about Hadassah.
Oh.
Did you ask me about Hadassah when I became membership, or NCJW?
I don't know what I said, but what I intended to ask was about NCJW.
I'm really telling you about Hadassah more.
Okay.
When I became involved in Denver Hadassah.
So these different aunts of yours were involved in a membership there. Mm-hmm. And then when you switched over and became NCJW membership.
Okay, I am not exactly sure who the president was then, but maybe Toots Manis could have been back then, or maybe before my time. I'm not sure.
So at that, when
I was membership, exactly, Charlene Spiegelman was president, and so that's who I was mainly involved with, her.
And when you became president was roughly, when did you serve as, how many years were you president, and roughly when was that?
Okay, I was membership for about 5 years, and then fundraising for about 5 years, and then president for 4 years. So about 15, 16 years I was involved with NCJW, and they were delightful. I really enjoyed the ladies, and even though it was political, it wasn't heavy. It was enough. Public affairs were a big part of it, and we had vice presidents who did that, and they were very good at it, and at our meetings would go through their notes and highlight the important things. And
the issues that they lobbied for or tried to engender interest in were mostly issues of what sort, would you say? To benefit women and children, or?
Definitely women and children, and about abortions, and similar to what we're still involved with. And still anti-Semitism, there was still some of that. Back in the day when I was president, it wasn't that long ago. About 8 years anyway. So
it was 8 years ago that you
well, I was president for 4 years, and now I haven't been for about 4 or 5. So I'm saying about 8 years ago.
So you took office around 2014 then?
About that. 13,
and at that
14.
point, when you first got involved in NC...
Actually, let me think about this. I think I was involved even before, more like about 2007. And I'm just not exactly sure.
That's okay. We don't need to dwell on that.
The dates that I was involved as membership and then fundraising and then president, but about that.
And in terms of fundraising, what were the kinds of events that were most successful for you?
Well, we had dances, dinners. We honored different people in our community, and that was the purpose of having the dinners. And then, of course, we would put tables together, and it was so much a person. And we raised money basically for our own group. And we had a component and I hope it still is running, I don't know for sure, was children's theater. And so a lot of that money went for their performances, their storage, their background stuff that they needed for the plays, and their costumes. And it was pretty hefty, and the insurance and all that, it was pretty hefty. So I think one of the things that I like to see, and maybe they're doing it now, is more community service, things that they're doing for the community, not just themselves. I'm hoping that they are.
Can you tell me the kinds of volunteer work that individuals did within NCJ, under the auspices of NCJW?
Well, they did volunteer to help students. They were tutors. They did that. We had many women very interested in doing that. Still, like I say, they did a lot of other programs, political things mostly. And we would have meetings at the Temple Sinai or Temple Emmanuel, and we invited the community to become familiar with what our chapter was actually doing. And I mean, I don't know how exactly to describe them, but they had different programs. And they decided ahead of time what they were going to work on together and present at these meetings.
And at that time, was the NCJW membership partly Republican and partly Democratic, would you say?
I don't know that that was a major issue. I don't think anybody had to declare. They didn't have to really declare, although of course, you know, when we had programs with the officials, in the city that we invited, and it was both Republican and Democratic people, and they would speak, and the community would come. We've had many functions at the JCC there, and they spoke about their position and what they would bring if they were elected.
So these were candidate forums.
We had a candidate forum, if that's what you would call it.
And what about refugees? Were you aware of what NCJW was doing to help resettle Soviet Jews, for instance?
Well, of course. And we had many Russian people coming into Colorado at the time. But, you know, I don't know if NCJW was the only one. I think the Jewish Family Service was really into that more so.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Good. And when, as an adult, I just have a few more questions.
Sure.
Did you attend any NCJW conferences?
I did.
And where were they located?
We went to Dallas, Texas, for the one I went to. We stayed at the Fairmont, and it was very interesting. We met a lot of different people. My husband also came with me, and he met a few of the gentlemen, but mostly the women, and they loved him. They all would say, "Come sit at my table," and it was cute. But I learned a lot, and more so political things at that time. At those conventions, you do learn that. Pelosi spoke at that one that I went to, and she was very lovely, very nice.
And did you think that your BBG experience from high school came in handy when you were active in Hadassah and NCJW?
Very definitely, very much so. I was very involved in high school, and we were doing a lot of community service there, and there was athletics. There was a lot of very important things that people in high school need. And as you get older, you still need people.
And were there any NCJW women here in Denver who really impressed you particularly?
The people that I worked with were just great. I had a wonderful board, and we just had a wonderful relationship and a great understanding, and I'm still friends with many of them today. And I don't know how I could say any more about being impressed. I just enjoyed them so very much.
And who were your officers, the fellow officers?
Yes, and also some people that were just in the group, not officers, but people that worked on these events just because they wanted to work on that particular event.
And what projects made you most proud as an NCJW member?
I think that the most important thing for me was being able to work with a variety of women, the variety of ages, and the actual programming that we did, working together. Each one had their little section that they did, their little, thing for that program. And it was just the meeting of the minds and accomplishing what we wanted to, have that particular event mean.
Good. I don't think, in terms of your own life, the last question will be, what sort of a difference did NCJW have in your life?
Dealing with people, the variety of personalities, bringing people together. And for me personally, many of them were very appreciative of the work I was doing, the meetings that I would hold. Many of them came up after every meeting, "Oh, Bev, that's a beautiful meeting," or, "I really got a lot out of this meeting." And it made me feel good that they appreciated my work.
Wonderful. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
In reference to...
Oh, just in general. I don't have any more questions. So.
Okay, no, just really the fact that I've remained friends with many of them, and we have a great relationship even outside of the group, means a lot. And I hope to keep them for as long as I can.
So was NCJW an important part of your Jewish identity as an adult?
No. I had a good Jewish identity as a kid. My bas mitzvah was very meaningful. As when you ask me about it, I can just still remember us all being up there and who was in there, and we all would try out for parts to have singing parts just for ourselves, not as a group together. And we would all try out for these parts and try very hard, and brought that memory back. And BBG, the same thing. It brought back the memory of all the dances I went to and people I met. And then as an advisor, the parents I met and their children. That was, well, truthfully, my whole childhood was around Jewish programs and Jewish organizations. And
as an adult, have you belonged to a congregation? Yes,
I belonged to 3 of them. Temple Emmanuel and HEA. And that's just the 2. My husband grew up at HEA, the Hebrew Alliance, and I grew up at Beth Joseph, and then it became merged with BMH. But my parents then moved over to HEA, and my children went to preschool at Temple Emmanuel, and I became a member then and remained a member, and so that's why I belong to the both.
That's terrific. Well, thank you so much, Bev. It's really been a pleasure getting to know you and hearing a little bit of your life story.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. And it's very nice meeting you too.
Thank you.
And hope to see you again soon.
Sounds good.
Yeah. And I have a question for you.
Sure.
Are you in NCJW now?
Yes, I'm a member.
Do you hold any positions?
Well, I have the title of historian.
Oh, that's right.
But I'm not an officer or on the board or anything like that.
I think it's very nice that they started that. As a matter of fact, I think it started with Jennifer. We thought that she would be good at historian. And so I'm kind of glad, because at the end of my presidency, I didn't know what that would entail or if it would become anything. So I'm glad that I met you and that you're doing this.
So Jennifer was the president who succeeded you when
Yes.
when your term was up.
Yes.
Jennifer Dechtman.
Yes.
And then Jackie Beckett, Jennifer's
Yes,
sister.
her sister.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that takes us full circle, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. It's been my pleasure.
And mine.
Okay.